Okay, call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you all for attending tonight. Will the clerk please call take the attendance?
All council members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Action to approve the agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Clerk, please take the roll.
Collins?
Aye.
Duran? Aye. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Tiltonburn?
Aye.
Wendell? Avery?
Aye.
Okay, item 4, budget workshop number 1 for 2023. Jake Meshi, Assistant City Manager, and Eric Rangel, our Chief Financial Officer, will present this item.
Thank you to the council. I want to start off by thanking Eric and Ashley for all the work that they do as part of this budget development process. It's a lot of number running. It's a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure everything comes out and balances. So want to recognize both of them for all their work on this process. I also want to recognize Ashley. She has revamped our presentation for tonight. I think it looks fantastic, so appreciate all of her work there. And then also we have a lot of our department heads here in the back, so I want to recognize and thank all of them. This is a 6-month process that we go through, a lot of hard work and commitment to bring forward a balanced budget to City Council. So thank you to all the staff that are here tonight. First, workshop schedule. You'll see we're here today on September 13th. The goal of today's meeting is to provide an overview of the budget. We'll go through the operating budgets. We'll talk about outside agencies. And then a new addition for this year is the 10-year long-term financial plan. This is a tool that will help us view our decisions in the context of a 10-year budget sustainability model. Eric will talk a little bit more about that later, but this is a great opportunity for us to see how the decisions we make today impact us for the future and to ensure the long-term viability and sustainability of our budgets here in Brookings. On September 27th, we'll talk mostly about the capital improvement plan, 10-year capital improvement plan, as well as any recommended changes to the fee schedule. We now have that October 11th meeting open. That's an optional meeting for a recap discussion and really any council-driven items that we may have. Maybe good discussion for outside agencies or any other topics we want to do a little bit deeper dive into in our budget process. I do want to mention that we want to make this as informal of a formal presentation as possible. So Mayor, members of the council, feel free to interrupt at will, and it's probably easiest if we just address questions on the slide they're relevant to. We will have some time at the end for additional questions and discussion as well. So this is our formal adoption process next that we'll talk about as part of the budget process. Tonight during the regular meeting, we will have the first reading of the property tax levy ordinance. Second reading will coincide with next week's meeting. We've taken advantage of a new state law that allows us to adopt our budgets later in the year. We do have to certify our property tax levy with the county and the state by October 1st, so we've had to separate that component out. So we'll have that first reading and second reading over our next 2 meetings to certify the property tax levy. October 25th is our planned date for the first reading of the 2023 budget ordinance. On November 8th, we will have the second reading of that ordinance, as well as the adoption of the 10-year CIP and the adoption of the fee schedule. Anything after November 8th is kind of our safety net, if you will, if we need any additional meetings. But certainly our plan is hope that we will wrap everything up by November 8th. So in front of you is the agenda for tonight. As mentioned, we'll kind of go through a high-level overview of our 2023, talk about our highlights. We'll do a total budget comparison of 23 versus 2022, talk about your primary revenue sources, how we fund our operations here at the city, go through our general fund, our special revenue funds, and our enterprise funds. Again, we'll turn it over to Eric to talk about our 10-year financial management plan. We'll get into the outside agency discussion and save some time at the end, hopefully, for any questions and feedback. So the budget overview, as kind of mentioned in the introduction, this is a 6-month process that it takes to develop, results in a culmination with the adoption of the annual budget. The city hosts a series of workshops, such as tonight, to provide a transparent and engaging process for members of the council as well as the public. The budget itself serves as a policy tool, an operations guide, a financial plan, as well as a communications device. And then staff, as we bring these forward to City Council, the discussions in the final budget document deeply consider the council's 5 focus areas of sustainability, innovative and service excellence, safe, inclusive, and connected community, fiscal responsibility, as well as economic growth. So here are the highlights of the 2023 budget from a very high level. As you'll notice, staff is going to bring forward a balanced budget to City Council. This means that our revenues are equal to our expenditures. We will be projecting positive sales tax growth. We're anticipating a 10% sales tax growth in 2022 versus 2021 over the year. And for 2023, we'll be projecting a conservative 2% growth on top of that. The general fund will show an increase of $1.7 million in 2023 from the 2022 adopted budget. That is mostly due to several primary areas, which include staffing, both in terms of annual salary increases, as well as a couple of additional positions that we'll be requesting for next year, insurance, inflation, and some smaller scale projects in that 10 to 20,000 range that are one time that fit into our general fund budget. Eric and his team do a fantastic job utilizing a multi-year approach as we go through the general fund. We're analyzing line item by line item. When we first started this process 3 years ago, it was a little bit easier. Now, if we can find $500 on a line item to trim it down and make it as close as possible, that's where we're at these days. So it is as lean and streamlined a budget as we possibly can bring forward. We focus on efficiency and organizational improvement. This is a complex and challenging process, and it's a much longer document. But ultimately, as staff, our goal is to make this as intuitive and easy to understand, not only for council, but for members of the public as well. And as mentioned, with the 10-year financial plan and all the decisions we make, our goal is really for a sustainable budget that provides us on the right track for long-term financial success. So the slide before you shows our total budget comparison for 2023 versus 2022. As mentioned, we kind of break these down by our four major areas: the general fund, enterprise fund, CIP, your special revenue debt service, which includes TIF. As you can see, the total 2023 budget is proposed for just over $61.5 million. This is an $8.5 million increase from the 2022 adopted budget. Over $5 million of that, or about 60% of that increase, is in your capital improvement budget, and that's project as well as inflation driven. For example, we're planning on the second phase of 22nd Avenue next year from Eastbrook down to 8th Street South. We're also seeing inflation hit those budgets a little bit harder in terms of our asphalt, our oils, and our materials, just the way the current economy and markets are operating right now. We will discuss the capital budget in more detail at the September 27th budget session, but just to note that the vast majority of the increase in this budget is located there and is project driven. The general fund, as a reminder, is your primary operating budget. This includes your police, fire, public works, community development, and the vast majority of your staff who are providing the services to our community day in and day out. As you'll see, again, the vast majority of your increases is in that capital improvement plan. The other funds are showing more modest growth, about $1.5 million or so in general fund and enterprise funds, and about $330,000 in the special revenue or debt service. Any questions right there, just from the budget at a high level? The next item we'll get into for the revenue sources. We've got four ones that we've broken down here to talk through: sales tax, property tax, the triple B, which is your bed, booze, and board, also referred to the 3B, and then your pillow tax or the business improvement district tax. That's your $2 per night on hotel stays. So as mentioned in the introduction, we're showing a growth assumption of 10% from 2021 to 2022. At our latest financial reports, we're actually about 15.5% above where we were last year. So this is a very conservative and realistic number to achieve, even though it does project good growth into the annual budget. Again, for next year, we're looking at a modest 2% growth on top of where we estimate to end this year. We do typically see about 3 to 3.5% growth, so that 2% growth, again, is conservative and very realistic and achievable number. The next slide we want to talk a little bit about is our property tax. That's another primary source of revenue in our general fund. This one is very formula driven. We work closely with Brookings County to determine how much we can increase our property tax levy year over year. Your levy is that total bottom dollar amount that we're levying in property tax. So that's that 3.8 number is what is known as your property tax levy. The way that we're able to increase that year over year is due to growth, or also known as net new construction, and then CPI. For many folks who are following the economy these days, you'll notice that CPI seems to be a bit higher than 3%, and it certainly is. The state law allows us to utilize CPI up to 3%, and then it's capped. So in a year like this, when we're looking at 8% inflation, we are losing revenue there, if you will, that we're not able to take full advantage of. As noted before, our total budget's about $61 million, $19 million general fund. Our property tax increase that we're able to take is about $160,000. So in the grand scheme, it's a very modest increase that we're able to take year over year. We do, as staff, always recommend council take that full increase, because anything that you don't take, you frankly can never get back, and you're leaving that on the table. This slide here shows our property tax levy by municipality, and this is the city-only portion. So for most organizations, the city portion of the property tax is a much smaller percentage. We'll have a slide on that next. Your school districts and your counties are also primarily reliant on property taxes. So you'll see that our mill is 2.52. Among our comparison communities, we are one of the lower ones. Only Watertown among our peers is lower. Eric did pull Sioux Falls, just as that was a question we got asked earlier, and they're about 4.23. So they're between Yankton and Vermilion, even though they are much larger the community than us. So as a whole, our property tax levy is quite small for the municipal portion among our peer communities. This slide here shows just how much of the property tax actually comes to the city. So there was a time that we would use a $200,000 home as our sample here, but as times have changed and prices have increased, we've switched that to a $300,000 home. So we estimate at your average $300,000 home in Brookings, your property owner is going to pay about $4,733 in property tax. 57% of that, or about $2,700, will go to the local school district. 27%, or almost $1,300, will go to the county. And then, frankly, the last portion there is the city percentage. We get 16% of that, and that comes out to about $760 that your $300,000 homeowner is paying to the city. So we do get the smallest portion there, and that's under $800 per year. The next tax up that we have to talk about is our Triple B again, or our bed, booze, and board. This one does show an anticipated growth of 9% from 2022 versus 2021. And we are projecting a very conservative 2% growth on top of that again. As a reminder, the Triple B primarily funds your economic development agencies and drivers like Brookings Economic Development Corporation, Visit Brookings, the Chamber of Commerce, the Swift Health Center, as well as now the Research Park, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So as we see here, the 3B projecting about a 9% growth with 2% next year. Our latest financial reports actually shows 3B up about 17% year over year right now. So again, this does allow us to slow down a little bit through the rest of the year and still make this very achievable numbers to attain. The last one here is your pillow tax, or your bid tax. This primarily goes to Visit Brookings, or the Convention and Visitors Bureau. It funds a portion of their annual request. The rest of their request is funded through the 3B as well. Pillow tax shows a more modest rebound versus the other revenue sources that the city receives. We're projecting 5% growth in 22 versus 21. Next year, again, a very conservative 2% on top of that. Right now, we are up about 15.5% or so in pillow tax year over year. We do estimate that we'll bring in just under $252,000 in that regard. The one thing to note for council and the public, when you see this in the budget, we'll show that we're budgeting $500,000 in revenue. As staff, we certainly don't anticipate to achieve that much. This one operates a little bit differently in that we can only collect as much revenue as we budget. So hypothetically, if we budgeted $250,000 and we came in right on budget, we'd be leaving about $1,800 or so on the table. So we always budget very high there, just in case there's a new hotel or something happens that we're not able to forecast, just to make sure that we're maximizing that revenue source. At this point, we'll get into a little bit more detail on the general fund. The purpose of this slide here is to show, as was highlighted in the introduction, that we are bringing forward a balanced budget to City Council. And what that means is that your revenues are equal to your expenditures. The money that we have coming in is the same amount that we have going out, and that makes for a sustainable long-term budget. It shows that we're not utilizing any reserve funding to fund our annual operations. On your expenditure side, your public safety, your public works, parks, rec, and forestry account for about 74%, 75% of your expenditures. On the revenue side, your sales tax, property tax, and transfers encompass about 82%. So several large departments account for the vast majority of your expenditures, and several revenue sources account for the vast majority of the revenues that are coming in. We do have several initiatives, projects and initiatives that we're proposing for 2023 within this balanced budget. Two primarily ones would be 2 new full-time positions. The assistant to the city manager is proposed to be funded 50% by the general fund and the other 50% by the 3B. We're able to do that as we're starting to see increasing revenues in the 3B that we'll cover in more detail. The other portion of that is we're seeing the Swift Health Center operating expense significantly decline, which is creating more capacity in our 3B fund. So the assistant to the city manager, again, proposed to be funded 50% from general fund, 50% from 3B. This position would focus on infill and redevelopment efforts. The city has about 10 to 15 years of developable land left until this community is fully built out. The Brookings School District is proposing significant investments in 2 neighborhood schools here in the very near future. And we're seeing that there is great potential in our core neighborhoods as well as business districts to strengthen the community's existing infrastructure and investments. If approved, this position would bring staffing capacity to move the community forward, focusing on our neighborhoods through infill and redevelopment opportunities. We're proposing a parks technician position for this upcoming year. We have 775 acres of parkland that our staff is responsible to maintain, and there's only 11 positions in our parks department that focuses on maintaining that full 175 acres. We had done a staffing analysis that looked at our peer South Dakota communities as well as our upper Midwest college towns, and we saw that we actually have the lowest ratio of staff to park acres among all of our peer communities per that analysis. So this would be an opportunity to fund our park staff at a little bit higher with an additional position and allow them to continue to provide the great services that we're expecting throughout our park system in the community. One of the things that we've been working on for a number of years is moving the research park into the Triple B. Frankly, out of financial necessity, we had funded the research park out of the general fund just because we didn't have that capacity in 3B. But as mentioned, with improving revenues as well as a decrease in the operating subsidy from the Swiftel Center, we now have that ability to move research park from the general fund into the 3B and locate it with those other economic development agencies like the BEDC, Swiftel Center, Chamber, so on and so forth. We do have some other smaller projects planned over this upcoming year. We do want to improve the audio and visual in this building. So it would frankly be this room and the room next door where we would have some enhancements there. We have a renovation of the Pioneer Park basketball court in there. That's about a $20,000 project. And then we do have some conference room improvements proposed for this building as well as over at the library. We have a number of softwares that we're looking to implement to take advantage of efficiencies, ADP for human resources, some rec software, as well as a purchase order and project management module that we're very excited about that would be organization-wide, help us better track and program expenses for our large-scale road projects, facility projects, and things of that nature. So that's a good efficiency improvement that we identified. Last and certainly not least, we want to make sure that we're investing heavily into our employees. So we've set aside funds for education reimbursement program for any individuals that want to continue on their education with a degree or course material that strengthens our staffing capacity and takes us to new levels that way, as well as focusing on training and seminars specific to each of our departments and divisions to allow them to continue building their skills and competencies there. This slide here shows an overview of the general fund revenue that we have coming in. The percentages that you see on your screen, that is the proposed change from this current year, 2022 to 2023 requested. We've already covered sales tax and property tax in fairly significant detail, so I'll just take this opportunity to address a few of our other revenue sources. Our transfers is about $3.5 million of our $19 million general fund. Brookings Municipal Utilities provides $2.6 million of that. The liquor store is about $345,000, and the landfill is at about $324,000 as the primary sources. You do notice a small decrease there year over year, less than 1%. That is due to a decrease in the landfill transfer from the landfill to the general fund. Reason for that is we're focusing on the long-term sustainability of the landfill as a revenue source. We're completing a solid waste master plan and want to ensure that we have the revenue sources available to implement projects and programs out there that will serve the long-term benefit of the landfill as an enterprise fund. Departmental is about $1.7 million. These are things that are generated from things like permit fees, fines and forfeitures through the police department, recreation and pool fees as well come through this portion. Other is about $1 million. Your largest source there, about $810,000 of that, comes through your liquor override. And then we've got smaller sources of revenue there within, like licenses, interest income, franchise fees, and a cell tower rental. Intergovernmental is about $700,000 of that. And those are revenues that come in between state and county shared revenues, a number of different sources there that come into the city. But again, that is your smallest source for the general fund.
Jay, can I ask a question quick?
Yeah.
I know we always struggle contributing to sales tax revenues. Do we have a sense of where that sharp increase in sales tax revenue is coming from this year?
I know Eric has been able to work with the state and get a little bit more detail on that. So I'd turn it over to him if he hasn't noticed any trends over this current year to see where our increases may be coming from.
I think the biggest growth has been retail and manufacturing sectors this year. The majority of the sales tax increase is just the overall inflation, and we're capturing that as well.
Any other questions? Covering the revenue side, now we want to see, we know where our money is coming from. Now we can show where our money is going. Overall here, highlighting that the percentages you're seeing is the percentage change from last year, this current year. As mentioned in the introduction, our increases are generally attributed to staff, inflation, insurance, and projects, but I do want to take this opportunity to run through some of our increases and provide just a little bit more detail. Public Works is anticipating to increase about $375,000 from last year to this upcoming year in 2023. This stems from the office manager in community development and engineering moving to a full-time position with the addition of a full-time deputy clerk. That was one position that we started off as sharing. We had brought a budget amendment request to City Council that was approved to make those 2 full-time positions, just seeing that it was a very challenging position for one individual, and this was a good opportunity to branch out. So we're happy to have a full-time office manager back downstairs, as well as a deputy city clerk. The other portion here is inflation. Within Public Works is your annual streets budget, and that's the one that's prone to more negative impacts from inflation, as our asphalt patching material and things of that nature have gone up significantly year over year. The police shows about a $360,000 increase from last year to propose for 2023. Most of that is in staff and software, as well as inflation in terms of vehicle maintenance, gas, as well as range expenses. Parks and Rec is about a $454,000 increase year over year. This would include the addition of the parks technician, as well as some of those smaller projects we mentioned, like the Pioneer Park basketball court renovation, as well as insurance and inflation hitting their budget. The administration portion includes the city manager's office, city clerk, city attorney, as well as the mayor and council. Increases here are to the proposed addition of the assistant to the city manager position, as well as moving the deputy clerk to full-time. This is the other portion of that increase. You'll see a fairly sizable decrease in the subsidies and appropriations. That's due to moving over the research park into the Triple B. So that's the main change there. Is that's about $150,000 that moved out and moved over. You'll see the transfers there is down by a 1.1. Over the last 3 years, city staff has come to council asking for some of your city council priority project funding to help us with our facility improvements in the capital improvement plan. We had engaged McKinstry back in 2019 to do a thorough analysis of all of our facilities and come up with a schedule for recommended replacements. Once we saw that we were significantly underfunded in the investments that we needed to make into a lot of the city-owned facilities. After 3 years of council providing that additional funding from their priority projects, we're now happy to say that our capital plan is balanced without requiring or requesting that additional transfer, and all of our capital projects are now budgeted for facilities in that budget. So that's about a $1.1 million decrease that we're not requesting in transfers, because we've now been able to make our facility improvement plan sustainable through the capital budget. Lastly, you'll see a large increase of about 140% in non-departmental. The reason for that is a good thing. We've got $175,000 in additional funding we're proposing to add to the contingency fund for next year. That really serves 2 purposes. Number one, it mitigates against any slowdowns in the economy that we may see into 2023. Additionally, we are looking at a large investment into our public safety facility, and we would anticipate that our surplus could go towards that in the future. But instead of asking council to commit those funds now, we thought it would be better to budget conservatively, have this for any slowdown in the economy, and then at the end of 2023 be able to revisit any surplus that we have collectively as a whole and decide how we would want to apply that as a group.
When do you expect to know what the surpluses are for?
I think we would have a good idea beginning of February, and that's when we would ask you to help us decide where you want to allocate that surplus to.
Any other questions? Service funds. Again, we're looking at about a $330,000 modest increase in this budget overall group of budgets here, requesting right around $9 million. I'll note for council and the public that these ebb and flow primarily based on projects. These are largely very project-driven funds. From a historical perspective, these funds did total about $12 million in 2021, so we're down about $3 million from there. And we do show, again, that modest $330,000 increase year over year. Just will address a couple of the notable changes here. 3BU and pillow tax are increasing largely from an improving economy. These funds fuel our economic development agencies, as we mentioned earlier, to include BADC, Chamber, so on and so forth. We are now starting to utilize a portion of these for our city expenses as well. For example, we pay for our annual website fees, marketing software, and then again requesting to utilize a portion of that for funding half of the assistant to the city manager position. And we've also moved the research park over here as well. Storm drainage is down due to the ebb and flow of projects. We'll be wrapping up our stormwater master plan later this year. That was about a $300,000 expense that we're not planning again for next year, so that'll come off the books there. Special assessment is up largely due to taking a couple of years off from our sidewalk improvement program, so we've recently awarded that bid through City Council, so we're planning to increase the activity there. Other ones are relatively modest changes. Public art is up about 17%, and really that's a formula based on our capital improvement plan. So we're at about 46,000 that we funded that at last year, and it would total about $55,000 for this upcoming year.
Jake, did you cover the E911 decrease?
It is primarily savings. So we had added a few positions last year, 3 different positions. We also created some dispatch leads, and then of course we've had some turnover in staff there as well. We have a pretty comprehensive way of projecting our staff increases through our HR department, who do a wonderful job. So as staff turns over, they're looking at what wage they're starting at, if they're taking group insurance or single or family type insurance, and programming that out. So frankly, we're just projecting that decrease primarily due to actual costs of staff expected for next year. At this point, I will turn it over to our esteemed Chief Financial Officer, Eric Rangel, to go through the Swiftel Center operating expense as well as a few of those long-term financial plan slides.
Thanks, Jake. Yes, as Jake mentioned, the Swiftel Center has done a tremendous job, and gotta give credit to OVG, which was formerly known as Spectra, Mike and team. Just to give you a little bit of like the background, in 2019, the subsidy of the city to the Swiftel Center was $517,000. That's your top left chart. And through the transition in management, in 2023, we're requesting $242,000. This is expected to go down, according to the business case of the RFP, to $145,000 by 2026. As I stated last time I presented my CFO report, we are expecting to end the year at budget, 330 or a little bit under budget. So they are delivering what they were promising. And again, this helps us fund other city initiatives or economic development initiatives as well. The next slide shows the 10-year capital plan. And this is a new slide mostly for the public and for you. So I'll take time to explain what we're seeing here. So on the Y, or the vertical axis, we're seeing the revenue. The green line is your revenues, and then your yellow is your expenses. So what we see from 2020 all the way to 2023 is how our revenues and expenses net each other. So we're seeing the trend in 2020 all the way to 2022 of higher revenues than expenses, and this is because we manage as a city very well our expenses, and our revenues usually come stronger due to our conservative budgeting practices. For 2023, you see those two lines intersect, which means a balanced budget. So the general fund, the revenues that we're estimating to get equal the expenses that we're supposed to get. And then what happens with the next years is we apply some growth assumptions to see how our current decisions in terms of personnel or ongoing expenses happen as they grow with inflation throughout the years. So we see from 24 all the way to 2027 that our revenues are expected to be higher than our expenses. In 2027, we're starting to see a turn, and then for the rest of the time, it's we're seeing a deficit, meaning that our expenses, you see that yellow line going above the green line. However, we do believe that that's 5 years from now. There are many tools that us as management can use to address this. Number one would be economic growth. We expect that our current initiatives for economic development will yield higher sales tax. Number two, we always have personnel attrition. As personnel leave or retire, we reevaluate, we invest in tools or software to be more efficient. And lastly, we could also control expenses if we get to that point as we get closer to those years. So we're pretty confident that it is manageable, and that the city, with this budget in the general fund, can ensure a long-term good financial position. Any questions on this model, on the chart? All right.
Eric, I just want to make a comment on that. So this is based on what we've experienced for the last few years on sales tax and stuff. So this could change based on getting more retail into our town also, correct?
That is correct. Right now, the assumption is that over the next years, but like you said, if our retail activity increases, it could go up to 10, 15% as well.
Thank you.
All right. 3B, and this is a very good story because you see that our total revenues have been yielding better than our total expenditures. And this is a really interesting curve because you see our expenditures declining over time. And this is mostly attributed to the Swiftville Center operational decline. The spread that you see between the total revenues and the expenditures is actually the amount that the city council can use to either fund other city services or economic development initiatives or agencies for our city as well.
Can you restate what 3B revenue, the BID?
It's a bed, board, and booze, and it's restricted for promotion of the city economic development, but it can also be used for maintenance of parks and recreational facilities. Did I miss anything, Steve? Yes. Okay. The bid tax, and I will. So good segue. Revenues kind of matching our expenditures. This one is a $2 fee on stays that are less than 25 days or 30 days. I may be wrong on that. And that is usually allocated. There's a board that I guess provides direction on where to allocate these funds. It usually goes 100% to the visitors Brookings Bruegel. And as we see in the 10-year plan, we have our revenues matching our expenses for this as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Jake.
Any questions for Eric? Next up, we have our enterprise, like a business. So the rates that you generate there are intended to fund not only their annual operations, but also provide for long-term capital needs as well. So what you may notice right away is that your landfill, your liquor store, and your research and technology center are operating at a surplus. Solid waste collections is self-sufficient to include their capital needs. Your golf course and your airports do require subsidies. For the golf course, $100,000 comes from the liquor store on the operational side, and then they get $148,000 from the CIP for capital needs. The airport gets $239,000 from the landfill for operations, and then another just under $77,000 from the CIP for their capital needs. Enterprise fund expenditures plus the transfers out increased by about $1.65 million from 2022. That change is largely due through the $1.5 million increase in what's noted as operating agreements. That is your liquor pass-through. That's money that comes in and goes back out. We also see some inventory costs increasing at the Brookings liquor store. This is due to the expectation to sell more product as well as the general price increase of purchasing that product. The airport saw a large decrease from last year to 2023 proposed, and that was just due to the timing of a capital improvement project out there. Other than that, there's more modest changes observed in landfill collections, golf course, and R&T center. And those modest increases are due primarily to inflation, personnel, as well as the timing of projects. A couple of changes that are noteworthy to be proposed in solid waste for 2023. This budget would include the addition of a solid waste flex position that would assist both on the collection side as well as the landfill side. We do have 5 automated collections trucks for 5 drivers, so anytime someone wants to take leave, we're now having an automated collection truck that sits idle, so this would improve our efficiencies. There's also a number of services that we're not able to get to during the standard week, and we are experiencing overtime. So we do anticipate seeing overtime decrease as a result of adding that position, as well as more efficiently and effectively utilizing our fleet. To reference that staffing analysis we talked about earlier for the parks position, all of our peer communities together, they average about 14.5 positions in their solid waste operations. We have 11 positions that are dedicated to solid waste, and then that position or that fund does also fund portion of our public works director as well as an analyst position. So this would put us more in line with some of our peer communities, as well as decrease the workload of some of our solid waste staff, both on the collections and landfill side. The solid waste does also propose some fleet and equipment updates that are more cyclical. We are planning another collection truck next year. generator pickups and trailers that are just on annual or regular replacement cycles. As a whole, when you take all of this in the aggregate, your enterprise funds are projected to operate at a surplus of about $620,000 for 2023. Last item for tonight before we get into questions and feedback is the outside agencies. So we will plan to go through the United Way again for our social service agency funding again this year. We'll ask Heidi and the United Way to come back before City Council in October next month to talk about the City Council's priorities for that social service agency funding and allow Council to have input on where they would like to see those funds dedicated to for this upcoming year. We are recommending as staff to increase the funding for social services up to just over $252,000. This would be a 5% increase from 2022. $5,000 of that would go towards the United Way. $3,500 is for their software that they utilize through the application process. The remaining $1,500 would be a small administrative fee for their time coming to council and providing their recommendations. Brookings School District, this is in line with past years. They submitted their usual request of $207,200. We have been funding them at $195,000, and staff recommends to continue funding them at that level. Similar story with the Arts Council, requesting for $35,000, and staff recommending to fund them at $30,000 has been done over the last couple of years. I will note that the community band did submit their application late. Per governance and ends policy, by the letter of the book, we should not fund them, but wanted to bring that to council to at least bring their request forward. The last slide focused on our outside agencies that are funded through our general fund. This one looks at outside agencies that are funded through our other funds, if you will. The SDSU PAC, we have a $917,000 payment. That is an obligation that the city made, and we're now in the process of having to fulfill that obligation. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, that is funded partly through 3B, your bed, booze, and board. The rest of that is funded through the pillow tax or the bid. Economic development, the city portion of that is $165,000, and then BMU gives an additional $50,000 that is funneled through the city to provide to them. The breakdown for that had typically been $103,000 to general economic development initiatives, $42,000 for retail, and $20,000 for workforce development. That would encompass the city's $165,000 portion of that. The research park, they had requested $195,000 as they wanted to add an additional position. Their typical request had been around $175,000. Historically had been at about $150,000. We're recommending to increase them by 3%, which would align with the increase to Visit Brookings to fund them at $154,500. The local scholarship fund comes out of the Brookings Liquor Store Reserve. We do have an additional slide on that after this, so we would recommend funding that again for 2023 in year 2. The health system, similar to the PAC, is an obligation that the city had made previously, and now we are honoring that obligation through funding it through our capital improvement plan. Dakota Community Market was a new request for this year. This is a local food co-op that is trying to get up and running. They had requested $75,000 from the city to fund their capital campaign as they're seeking donations to reach a target dollar amount to get that project off the ground. Staff is recommending at this time not to fund that as it's not a tangible item. We felt that might be a little bit speculative with some of our outside agency funding. Great initiative, but would rather see them ask for specific items geared towards that facility. The chamber, we had historically given them a lump sum that included funds for the chamber general, downtown, as well as downtown at sundown. We are breaking that out for council and the public to show where those funds are going. In total, the chamber requested $85,000. Staff is recommending to fund that in full, with $30,000 of it going to the chamber general, $30,000 going to the downtown, and then $25,000 for downtown at sundown. That request is down slightly from years previous, as downtown at sundown's been doing fantastic. It's a great event, and we're seeing more and more interest in that year over year. The SDSU student visitor promotion, they request about $50,000 from the city annually. We've been working with them to realize that they have reserves at the end of the year. So we engage them, find out what they're projecting to end at the end of the year. And then as staff, we bring forward a recommendation to get them back up to that 50,000 number. So at the end of 2022, they're projecting that they'll end the year around $25,000, $30,000 still in their reserves. And as staff, we're recommending the $25,000 to get them back up to $50,000 total. Lastly, recommending a modest increase in the 4th of July fireworks display. That's been a great event. Uncle Sam Jam was very well attended this year, and we want to continue to support that and allow Pete to have some fun out there with the firefighters once a year too. I'm going to pause there if council wants to talk about any of these outside agencies. We do have one more slide on the scholarship program specifically, but any of these other ones would be a good time to talk about those.
Like part of the presentation that you're doing where you're comparing it to the peer cities. And I think that should be encouraged to do more of that because it is nice to know how we stand to these other surrounding towns that are like us. As far as the outside agencies, I do think we should have that October 11th meeting to discuss this because I'd like to see where this money is actually going for. I did read the applications that were submitted as well as the 2021 progress reports. And I'm a little concerned on some of the progress reports. I mean, as whether or not they're addressing the points that they were supposed to have done with the money. So I just would like them to clarify that. And I don't know if, I don't think we need all of these, and maybe we can come up with a list of the people, the outside agencies that we'd like to have present on October 11th. I'm just throwing that out there.
I would echo those sentiments and say I think having the meeting on October 11th to kind of further delve into the outside agency funding would probably be appropriate. Along those lines, so I don't know if that needs to be a motion in a second. If that was a motion and is, I would second it.
I think that'd be fantastic.
Bonnie, am I speaking for you? Is that a motion that you've made?
That's a motion.
Okay, and then I would
All right, it's
second.
been moved and seconded. Anybody got any other comments on that? Is there any public? Please call the roll.
Duran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tiltonburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins.
Aye.
Line of questioning. I'm wondering, could you go back and say what the funding was going to be for United Way for this process? I think you had mentioned some software and then hours that we would be funding. Can you highlight again what was that amount was?
Yep. So of the 255,000 of that go to the United Way. 3,500 of that is for their software that they utilize through the application process. So they have a special software that they utilize for that. And then the other part would be $1,500 for just an administrative fee for their time that they spend coming to council, recommending or going through the priorities first in October, and then coming back later to provide the full list of recommendations to council on which agencies to fund and at which level.
Funds, can we go back to the airport? This is the slide. So I've wondered this in the past. The line item of under rentals, we generate about $40,000 a year in rental revenue. Does that include any agreement we have with South Dakota State University, or are there dollars that are exchanged with the university for their use of the airport, and is that reflected in the budget detail?
Yes. I want to follow up on that to make sure to give an answer tonight. Our primary source of revenue is through hangar rental, and I believe that's what's captured there in that rental line item. So our primary, and that includes South Dakota State as well, that they have hangars on site. So we do have hangar rental fees that would apply to them.
So some of those dollars might come from the university, others might come from private entity that are using the hangar.
That is correct. And I see Charlie nodding too, so that makes me feel a little bit better. To that point, Charlie. Well, we have opportunities for more questions at the very end. This slide here that we wanted to highlight was as we bring forward a balanced budget to City Council, there are always initiatives that staff and the departments bring forward that don't make the cut. And unfortunately, as budget leadership, we want to make sure that we're presenting balanced budgets to Council. So this slide here is just an opportunity to show some of the items that we didn't bring forward to Council within this proposed budget, just to show that there are additional wants and needs out there that are not being funded by the 2023 proposed budget. Streets had requested an additional mechanic position. That would also be a heavy equipment operator to take advantage of our expanding fleet management services that we're offering in-house, as well as continuing to strive to provide more snow removal in-house as opposed to a contracted service. IT had requested and other IT specialists to bring them up to 2 IT specialists and a manager. This position would have focused specifically on public safety to include the E911 center, as well as all the technology that we see in our squads and reply on day in and day out to provide a safe community. Community development had requested an associate planner to take on more to day-to-day activities, focusing on helping folks at the counter as they get a lot of walk-ins, helping prepare planning commission, board of adjustment agendas, city council agendas, and some of those smaller level projects to free up the city planner as well as our community development director to tackle more of our strategic community development initiatives. A couple of projects that we left out, Human Resources was looking at a consultant to specifically look at risk management and mitigate that to ensure that our liabilities were minimized. We're currently doing that in-house, but thought perhaps a fresh set of eyes or an outside opinion would have been helpful in that. And lastly, we're looking at some software that primarily would have focused on emergency alerts and would pair up with our city website that would be managed by a public information officer. And that would just be a way to communicate during severe events such as the derecho and other things of that nature. The last slide, again, staff is recommending the second year of funding for the scholarship program. That would be $100,000 of funding through the Brookings Liquor Fund. $80,000 of that would go towards the South Dakota State University Foundation, and the $20,000 would go to South Dakota Technical Communities working through Brookings Economic Development Corporation. If there's desire to have more discussion on the scholarship, we could incorporate that into the outside agency discussion on the October 11th date as well.
But I think that's a general agreement there, I think, amongst council. We'll
Agree
have a
with
little
that.
bit better understanding then.
That'd be a great idea.
Uh, let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll start the general meeting. While everybody's getting a seat, we're going to start the open forum. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council on an item not listed on tonight's agenda? Please state your name and address.
Jeanette, 1709 Dirt All Drive, Brookings, South Dakota. And my concerns tonight are still hinged on COVID, because I see that COVID has not been totally eradicated here in Brookings, or at least we're still operating under a resolution that was passed last August. And another thing that kind of triggers my interest in COVID is the upcoming vaccines on the SDSU campus. And I know we have a close affiliation with SDSU, and we just heard that in the presentation with scholarships and other areas, which is a very good thing. Now, my concerns with the COVID vaccines and with COVID in general is that I believe we have been lied to, and at best, some half-truths. And I think we've all been operating under some of those lies and half-truths. Now, more and more is coming to light. As time goes on, even some stories leak out into the mass media that we hear that are somewhat disconcerting, or at least they are to me. And I again just remind all of you that you have sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of our country as well as our state, the matters having to do with our city. And to do that well, we have to have good information. So I don't know who still trusts Dr. Fauci or the CDC as their main source of information, but I do not. And I brought along a book that's written by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I don't know if anyone has seen or read it before. It's been a bestseller. And if anyone reads this book, there have been no lawsuits filed against Mr. Kennedy for his claims in this book, and it's very well researched and very well cited throughout. There won't be a love affair with Dr. Fauci if you've read this book. Another thing that I pulled out of my papers this afternoon was the event that took place last year between our city and SDSU, which was Your Shot to Win. And that was greatly troubling to me at that time, and it still is. We offered scholarships, and we offered people in our community chances to win money to take part in a medical experiment. And I have yet to meet a person who took the shots who knew that they were participating in a medical experiment, even if they read the fact sheets. And the fact sheets, which are documents provided under the emergency use authorization status, tell us clearly that this is still an experiment. And now that experiment extends down to children 6 months of age and older. I can't tell you how heart-sickened I am by that. It's one thing for adults to make a choice or not to research or to take an experiment, but to put children in that position when we know very well children were never at risk. Now, I have many other documents. I'll be happy to share them. In fact, I will probably share them with Bonnie, and if she wishes to post them as part of the record, I'll be more than happy to share them, and I'd also be more than happy to talk to any of you individually or as a group. Thank you.
Any other people in the audience here that would like to approach and have opinion or statement to the council? Seeing none, move on to consent agenda. Item 6 is the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, does the council have any questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tiltonburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran.
Aye.
Okay, we move on to item number 7, presentations and reports. And Jake Mischie, our Assistant City Manager, will introduce our new Public Works Director.
Thank you. Introduce John Thompson, our new Director of Public Works. John comes to us from Fresno County, California. He worked there for over 14 and a half years, 14 years of that in Public Works, and was recently promoted into the Assistant Chief Administrative Officer role there. John is originally from the area as well as his wife, so this is an opportunity for them to come back to the great state of South Dakota. We're excited to have him. Look forward to all the great things John's going to do, and I'll give him a chance to add anything that he'd like.
Well, thank you, Jake. Good afternoon, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. John Thompson, as Jake gave a perfect presentation. Yes, me and my wife are both from this area. I'm from Hendricks, Minnesota. My wife Stephanie is from Astoria, South Dakota. We have 2 children. One's in 10th grade and one just graduated, looking for a job right now. We're excited to come back here. We've been wanting to come back to family for quite some time. The opportunity with the city and to work with Paul and his team, it's going to be great. Looking forward to getting to know you and getting to know the community again and engage with this community. Thank you. You got any questions?
Proclamation. We have National Policewoman Day today. Chief will join me. All right. Mayoral Proclamation. Whereas the Brookings Police Department values the benefits of a diverse workforce and is committed to becoming more representative of the community. And whereas the recent Brookings Center for Public Safety Management study called for greater investment in attaining a diverse workforce, especially focusing on attaining female officers. Whereas only 12% of officers and 3% of police leaders are women. Whereas research shows women officers use less force, less excessive force, are perceived as more honest and compassionate, make fewer discretionary arrests, and see better outcomes for crime victims, especially in sexual assault cases. Whereas the Brookings Police Department is committed to the 30 by 30 plan, initiative goals to increase women in police recruitment classes to 30% by year 2030, and ensure policies and cultures intentionally support the success of qualified women officers throughout their careers. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Opke G. Niemeyer, Mayor of the City of Brookings, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, September 13, 2022, as Policewoman Day. And I think the chief's got something to say also.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Management, folks of the community that are here to celebrate this mayoral proclamation. I'd love to take credit for this, being your new police chief, being here 3 weeks, because it would look really good for me in the public eye, but I can't do that because of honesty. When this was first brought to my attention, it was by Sergeant Peterson within the police department and his team. And when they brought this to my attention, and they said that they wanted to recognize this day, it was very easy for them because a member of their team is Jory Hart. And she's the only female police officer that we have here in Brookings. The minute I took this job and I got to meet Officer Hart and I came here, I knew exactly what they were talking about. She is a consummate professional. She's quiet. She's a little bit untangible. You can't really pin her down as but I've seen her in action now. I've seen her in the station and outside and with her team and outside with the community. And I will say she sets the example for future generations that we are looking to recruit in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for over 30 years, and I can tell you that we're in good shape in Brookings with her at our side and with her as the face of our recruitment, not just for young women, but young men as well, and to diversify our police department. So I'm not going to say any more because if I stand up here, I'll talk everybody to death. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite Sergeant Peterson up and his team to present Jory with a plaque and to honor her and recognize her, not just for being a female, but for being the professional in law enforcement in a society that needs it right now more than ever. So please, come on up.
So like the chief said, I can't take credit for this either. This was actually members of my team that brought this forward. But Jory, we would like to present you with this plaque. As noted, for your selfless, professional, and dedicated service to the community of Brookings, South Dakota, to your team, our department, and our community. I know that it's just a token of our appreciation, but we really do appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much. I'll be really fast, but I just wanted to say thank you to my team because I know that they were the ones that brought this forward, and this career alone, as difficult as it is, and women in law enforcement face their own challenges, but I would not be where I am today if it weren't for the people that I surround myself on this team with this department. I have an amazing supervisor, and the people that I come to work with every single day have never made me feel anything more than capable, validated, and very much part of the team, so thank you to them.
All right, really cool. With that being said, SDSU report, Erica? I have to say the last name, Erica Van Nieuwenhuis.
Yes, that's
Very
right.
good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Erica. I'm the Government Affairs Chair for SDSU Students Association. The first thing I'm going to start out with tonight is we had our first student tailgating on Saturday at the football game. Around 400 students came, so that was really surprising, and we were glad that that many showed up for the first one. It was hosted by State-a-thon, so they had some activities there going on, and this coming Saturday we have another home game, so we'll do another student tailgating, and it will be hosted by Little International, which is another organization at SDSU. We just we made a diversity liaison position on our executive team, so we did applications for that, and then we swore in Harley Fisher, who is our new diversity liaison. She's partnering with the American Indian Student Center and Multicultural Office on campus to plan events and get more senators and our exec team involved with those areas on campus. Another update is campus dining. This is a really big one. We transitioned from Aramark to Sodexo this year, so a new company, and we're monitoring that transition. There's been a few bumps in the road, just with everyone coming back and figuring out dining for the first few weeks, but it's worked out really well. We will have more dining options available, and we're working to have more ordering options as well, whether that be like the Starship robots and more mobile ordering, so it could be delivered to your dorms. So we're working with that. And then last night we had our second meeting, and we approved 3 constitutions. So we had the Botanical Society student chapter, the Pre-Dental Club, and then the Fashion and Apparel Club. All of those passed unanimously. And then we had Resolution 22-2-R, and that was recognizing September as Mental Health Awareness Month, and that passed unanimously. And then we also had Amendment 22-1-A, and that was just updating some responsibilities for the SA Communications chairperson, and that passed. And then for a little campus update, we had One Day for State last week on September 9th, and we raised $2.1 million for the school, and the foundation exceeded their $5,000 donor goal by having 5,362 donors. So that concludes my report, and I will be around for any questions.
Thanks, Erica. Anybody have any questions? I just have one comment. There was a great attendance by the student section this last time. It was full.
Yes.
It looked really good. I was very impressed. And it was actually a really good ball game, too.
It was, yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay, item 8, contracts and change orders. Resolution 22-075, authorizing change order number 1. It's the final for 2022-06 STI Chip Seal Project, Top Coat Incorporated. Charlie Richter, City Engineer, will review this item.
Good evening. Requesting approval of Resolution 22-75 for the authorization of change order number 1 for the 2022 Chip Seal project. The original contract is with $397,637.78. The proposed balancing change order is for $6,859.70 for the additional oil we use this year. This change order will complete this project. Staff recommends approval of this resolution.
Thanks, Charlie.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, close public hearing. Does the council have any questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Specker,
Aye.
Tildenburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran,
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. Item 8B, Resolution 22-076, rejecting bids on 2022-03 SSI Harvey Dunn Street Storm Sewer Improvements. Charlie Richter, our city engineer, will review this item also.
I'm here. 22-76, rejecting bids for the Harvey Dunn Street Storm Sewer Improvements Project. This project would install storm sewer on Harvey Dunn from First Avenue to Main Avenue to address flooding concerns in the neighborhood and provide an outlet for storm drainage for the food and security building that is being built. This project was opened on August 16th, 2022, and received one bidder. The only bidder for the project, Bose Construction, provided a bid of $438,756.55, which is approximately 48% higher than the engineer's estimate. Staff is recommending rejecting this bid and rebidding the project this winter when more favorable bids can be received.
Thanks, Charlie.
So moved.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, does the council have any questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Tildenburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Item 9, ordinances, first readings. Item 9A, introduction and first reading on ordinance 22-031, an ordinance certifying the 2023 City of Brookings property tax levy to the Brookings County Finance Officer. Ashley Wrench, our Senior Finance Manager, will review this item.
This is the first reading of ordinance 22-031, certifying the 2023 City of Brookings property tax levy to the Brookings County Finance Officer. State law requires certify tax levies included in the annual appropriation ordinance to the County Finance Officer by October 1st of each year. The city's levy is computed by taking the amount that was certified last year plus factors for growth and the Consumer Price Index, which are provided to us by Brookings County. To calculate the levy for 2023, the growth factor is 1.2449% and the Consumer Price Index factor is 3%. As Jake stated earlier, although the actual consumer price index is higher than 3%, we're capped at this amount under state law. And the total property tax increase for 2023 is approximately $155,000 for a total of just over $3.8 million. The second reading of this ordinance will be on September 27th, and I'll stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Public comment on this item. Councilor. All right, we'll have second reading on the next meeting on the 27th of September. Item 9B, introduction and first reading on ordinance 22-032, an ordinance authorizing budget amendment number 8 to the 2022 budget.
Thank you,
Ashley
Mayor.
Wrench
and
will
members
also present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Ordinance 22-032, authorizing amendment number 8 to the 2022 budget. The City of Brookings was recently granted a program to pay off our state revolving fund loan that is associated with the first phase of TIF 1 improvements. The city has received enough TIF revenues to pay this loan off in full, and the loan was originally scheduled to be paid off in 2031. will experience a savings of approximately $50,000 in interest by paying this loan off early. This amendment will increase the budget in the TIF 1 fund by $359,707.37 in the principal account and $2,276.50 in the interest account to pay the balance in full. This payment is scheduled for October 1st, and the second reading of this ordinance will also 27th.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, does the council have any questions or comments? We'll also have a second reading on this on the 27th of September also. Item 10A, public hearing and action on Resolution 22-073, a resolution authorizing an application for financial assistance, authorizing the execution and submittal of the application, and designating an authorized representative to certify and sign payment requests. Eric Witt, the engineering manager in engineering, will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us tonight. Hopefully tonight's topic is a familiar one. It is the water system upgrade. We've been to the council before on this topic. The technical details remain the same. However, the price has changed. So with me tonight to present the topic, we'll actually be applying for a second SRF loan. With that loan, we need a second public hearing and a supporting resolution. So same team as last time in last November. Joe Honor, project manager from HDR, will present the technical details. And First District Association of Local Governments will present the financial information. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe, and he'll go into the technical portion of the discussion.
Thank you, Eric. As Eric mentioned, my name is Joe Honor. I'm the project manager for HDR on the expansion project for the water treatment plant and distribution pipeline. Mentioned we're here for a second public hearing. We were here back in November for the first public hearing. That one was for $74 million for the total project of the pipeline and the treatment plant. It included $21 million of ARPA grant, federal funds, and then $50.9 million of an SRF loan. That loan is at an interest rate of 1.875% over a 30-year period. We're here today for additional funding package. As we've proceeded with the project and bid pipeline projects, and we recently opened bids on the water treatment plant project, we've seen significant increases, and not only on this project, but in several projects we've bid over the last 6 to 12 months. We're seeing impact from inflation, fuel price increases. A lot of the things that everybody's seeing in their day-to-day are impacting the contractors and the projects they're bidding. We're also seeing market volatility in materials of PVC pipe, steel. The war in Ukraine, one of our estimators indicated that like 60% of the base pig steel that's used comes from 40% from Russia, 20% from Ukraine. So the war is having an impact on that price that they're able to get for manufacturing components that are relative to the water treatment plant project. Supply chain issues are impacting everything, and they're impacting contractors and vendors in providing the materials for these types of projects. And the contractor sees all this stuff, and then they have to assume a risk for what's going to happen on this project, or what could happen with this market volatility, what could happen with the schedule. So all those factors, in addition to the ARPA funding that I mentioned, there's a lot of money out there for projects to be done. And as things continue to go, there are going to be more projects that are going to be bidding, and it's just going to continue to get more and more, where less and less the contractors are going to be so busy that they're not going to be looking at projects, particularly big projects like this water treatment plant that we've bid here recently. So that's some of the impact of those factors are impacting the additional funding that's being needed. Reasons for moving ahead on this project in light of the additional funding is the current bidding environment that I mentioned is there are no signs that it's going to go down. It may stabilize at times. It's likely not going to go down for the foreseeable future relative to the materials that we're seeing. The ARPA funding on contractors, if you delay a project now and you're going to bid it next spring or next summer, there may be less contractors. We had 2 contractors bid this project. We may only have 1, or we may have 0, depending on the projects that they've bid already and they already have in their schedule to do. The North Water Treatment Plant the first part of that was built in the 1930s. So it's 90 years old, parts of that are, and the newest parts I think were probably in the 50s and 60s. So it's reached its useful life and it needs to be taken out of service, and a new plant needs to be constructed. And the grant funds that I mentioned, if this project doesn't move forward, they're only available for so long, and that $21 million of grant would go away if the project doesn't move forward. So this additional funding package that would be being pursued is up to $40.7 million. The application would go in October. There is potential for that 1.875% over 30 years to be available for this next loan. If that application would go in after the first of the year, it would be guaranteed that it would be a higher interest rate, and we don't know what that interest rate would be at this point. The financial impact, Planning District 1 is here, and they're going to discuss that towards the end of this public meeting. So just to kind of just go through quickly what this project includes, it includes a source water expansion, a new water treatment plant, and then finished water pipelines that would be incorporated within your distribution system. So the existing North Well Field would incorporate 2 additional wells. The East Well Field would incorporate 4 additional wells, and there would be new raw water pipelines that would bring the water to the new water treatment plant. The water treatment plant would be a 6 million gallon a day treatment plant, lime softening, media filtration, which matches the current processes at both of the existing facilities. There'd be administration offices. We're backwash recycle, so we're recycling some of that water that's used to backwash the media filters. 1.5 million gallons of on-site storage, and then the lime softening process generates solids in lagoons that have to be handled and then removed and disposed. And then the distribution system, there'll be a 16-inch main line that would go north from the water treatment plant, and a 20-inch main line that would go south and would go over to your 20th Street Tower on the south end of town. As a part of any of these projects, we do have to achieve environmental compliance. We communicate with potentially agencies that could be impacted. We reached out to the various agencies that would be impacted by the project on the pipeline side and the water treatment side, and there are no adverse impacts for culture or environmental resources with this project moving forward. With that, I will turn it over to Greg Mogg.
Good evening. My name is Greg Mogg. I'm a staff member with First District Association of Local Governments. Our staff has been working with Brookings Municipal Utilities to develop the application here to request the $40.7 million to help fund this water treatment project here. And so the application will be submitted to the Department of Ag and Natural Resources here for their evaluation. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the impacts on rates. On the slide up there, they've got the current rate of $40 a month. That's based on 5,000 gallons of usage. And that's a requirement for the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources, that every application that comes in uses the same metric. So they can better evaluate the applications, and they can also do basically apples to apples comparisons with other applications that are coming in. So we're anticipating here is to see the rate increase incrementally over the next few years to the $51.65, again, for 5,000 gallons of usage. Now, that fee should generate sufficient revenues to repay the loans, the first loan that's already been received by the city and BMU, and the second loan that we're anticipating to get for this. And it also will help with, of course, operations of the water system. So that's basically my short presentation that we have. Is there any questions?
Thank you. The 40 million, and I'm not sure who to address the question to, but how was that estimated, and is that like a set amount, or are you just estimating that it's going to increase a certain percent due to the shortages?
So there's the water treatment plant project, and there are 4 phases of pipeline projects that are a part of this overall project. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the pipeline have been bid, and the water treatment plant has been bid. So based on where those numbers are at, with the estimated cost of the 2 additional pipeline projects that would be incorporated and the wellfield expansion, the combination of those estimates with the bid numbers is what's getting us to that number.
Thank you.
Any other questions by? Okay. Open public hearing on this. Is there any public comments or questions? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any council questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 10B, public hearing and action on Resolution 22-074, a resolution relating to the improvement of drinking water facilities, authorizing and directing the issuance and sale of a revenue bond to pay the cost of said improvements, defining the terms and manner of payment of the bond and the security thereof, and approving the form of loan agreement. I don't have your name down here, but we'll certainly have the Chief Financial Officer present this item.
Eric Witt, am I? Laura Julius, Financial and IT Manager, Brookings Utilities. The resolution in front of you is to administratively authorize the closing of Loan 1. Page of that resolution, it is the $50,963,000. That is a 30-year term at 1.875. With the approval of that resolution, we turn that over to the state and work on closing documents. That allows us to draw on those funds as we're needed as these projects go forward. The annual debt retirement will be at $2,236,000. And just a reminder that of the total SRF loan of about $51 million, there was $21 million of the ARPA grants that we will spend first as we proceed with these projects. Stan, for
Thank
any
you.
questions?
Or questions? Seeing none, close public hearing. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Does the council have any questions or comments? Seeing none, please call the roll.
I would
Ava?
just
Councilmember Specker, what can I?
like to make a suggestion to BMU. You know, I don't know if you were here earlier when we were going over the budget, but it's really nice to know how Brookings compares to peer communities. And I'm not sure how often you put those on inserts in the billing, but I think it would be nice to show how, you know, not just water, but electric, how Brookings compares to some of the surrounding communities, because I think that Brookings does really well, and I think it would be nice to let people know that when it comes to utility charges. That's all.
We do pretty well on our services, and our rates are relatively competitive with communities around us and our same size. So yeah, that's not a bad point to make. Okay, any questions, comments, anyone else? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran. Aye. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Item 10C, second reading and action on ordinance 22-030, an ordinance pertaining to the unlawful use of dynamic braking devices. Charlie Richter, our city engineer, will review this item.
I'm here tonight for the second reading of ordinance 22-30 that prohibits the use of dynamic braking within city limits. Dynamic braking, often referred to as Jake braking, is a device on larger trucks used for braking independent of wheel brakes. Because these devices use engine compression to slow a vehicle, these Jake brakes can create a loud noise that can carry long distances. These loud noises are often a nuisance as they can be heard day and night. Like many communities within South Dakota, the city is proposing that these Jake brakes be prohibited from being used within city limits except in an emergency or for emergency response vehicles. The local business community for comment on this ordinance and receive positive or neutral feedback. The Traffic Safety Committee has recommended this ordinance along with the police department and engineering. Staff recommends approval.
Moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, does the council have any questions or comments? Councilmember Collins.
Wondering if you figured out the penalty yet?
The penalty would be equal to or less than $200 per violation. And we typically have a standardized penalty that would apply to traffic violations. And I believe that runs about $132 total for a violation.
Councilmember Avery.
Intent of the resolution, I'm just wondering, is it, you know, it's nice to be able to put up signs that don't do that. As far as enforceability, is there really going to be much? Because if a truck has done this and then he's gone, I mean, almost the police officer would have to be right there at the time when I mean, it's just kind of a, isn't the real issue that they're maybe moving too fast to start with, or that this, you know, maybe we should be looking at the speed limits, that the trucks should be slowing down before they get to the point where they have to use that braking system?
Yeah, and I can't speak for the police station on how they will implement this, but I'd imagine it'd be complaint-based, and that they would, the police department would respond to complaints and then have to station there and park vehicles there while, you know, monitor the situation as things develop. Unfortunately, it's not a silver bullet to eliminate those things, but it's an attempt to try to reduce the violators of the ordinance and the loud noises.
Because it does seem like where some of our truck traffic, when you're out on the street, it moves by you pretty fast. But we've got loads that are pretty heavy, and I'm maybe glad they have those Jake brakes, so if they're going to run into me, they'd be able to stop.
Well, the ordinance states that it can be used in an emergency situation. We don't want to take that away from truck drivers, but at the same time, we don't want them to continually use those for non-emergency situations.
Sure.
Councilmember Avery, I'd also add to that, we can look at signage throughout the community and strategic locations to serve as a reminder of this, to encourage not to do that behavior. But as Charlie mentioned, we do have that still available in emergency situations. This is a mechanism to deter that behavior. Additionally, as those that are observing it are likely to maybe catch a license plate or see which businesses that they're going to, so we can also use communication efforts as well as other measures that are more relationship-based as opposed to strictly enforcement-based. But this does provide another mechanism for city and the staff to enforce this and limit that nuisance within the community.
I have a question. What about, we've got some city limits that surround both sides of 14 bypass, and then there's places where only half of it is city limits. How does that apply?
Well, we technically have the authority to enforce certain ordinances within a mile of the city. But the bypass, I think we'd basically be able to sign the bypass and prohibit in certain areas on the bypass as well.
Okay. I guess the question is there any other council questions or comments? Oh, Brienne, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. for the work on this. I appreciate that it's not only reactive to complaints, but it's trying to be proactive in keeping our community safe. So I appreciate that it also had those other mitigation efforts that we talked about last meeting, such as the signage. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for everyone else that was involved. I have one question, and this might be for you, Steve. I noticed in other towns, after they passed this sort of ordinance or resolution, it had to be approved by the State Department of Transportation. Would that be true for us, that this would then have to be reviewed by a higher authority?
I think we would not need to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Collins,
Aye.
Duran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tiltonburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 10D, public hearing and action to move a single-story residential home from 1218 6th Street to the property described as Lot 3A, Block 9, Moriarty Edgebrook Addition. Mike Strucker, Community Development Director, will.
Mayor and members of the council, the action before you tonight is consideration for a house moving permit. This is part of a redevelopment project. Half a block recently went through a rezoning process that was approved for commercial development. The homes in that block, there are some that are in really nice condition. And the applicant is here tonight, but he is proposing to move one of the homes from this location down to the Moriarty Edgebrook Addition, located just north of 20th Street South on Pinehurst. That lot is currently vacant. There's a single-family house immediately adjacent to the south, and there's single-family homes to the west. There's detention pond and apartment complex to the east. You did see some pictures of the existing home that is proposed to be moved, and per an ordinance, it's a unique ordinance for the city of Brookings that if it is a stick-built house that has been lived in within the city of Brookings and is to be moved within the city of Brookings, it's required to come to the city council for a public hearing and approval before that moving process can begin. This is being recommended for approval from the staff, and your sustainability goal of trying to adaptive reuse of existing homes in the community. And so it's a home in good condition, and there's certainly lots of years of value left in that home, and so finding a good location for it permanently to reside. So with that, I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. This item, Bonnie, our city clerk, has a letter that was written that she's going to read out loud. That was a comment from public.
This letter was received today from Jenna Schulte. She is a realtor at Best Choice Real Estate. She cites, I have reviewed the house moving plan that is proposed to move next to our house. I am out of town for a work meeting, but I would like to send the message that I completely endorse this move. I look forward to having a home next to mine. This home looks to have a lot of character, and I feel it will enhance my neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other public comments, questions? Close the public hearing. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Does the council have any questions or comments on this item? Council member Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is not specific to this particular house, but it seems kind of odd to me that we need to go through a public hearing to make a decision of this nature, and I know that this is an ordinance that goes way back. So I'm wondering what the process would be to change this ordinance so in the future someone doesn't have to go through a public hearing process for us to be able to greenlight a move of this nature.
It can be changed, and we could make it, and it's basically just so that we have adequate information and can consider the facts and determine the appropriateness of the location within the city where it's proposed to be moved. So I think we should have some type of an oversight with respect to those moves, but it could be done through community development.
It just seems to me like, a revisiting a section 3, keeping that process internal with staff rather than coming through a public hearing process seems probably the fairer approach, and maybe it's appropriate for staff to consider that and give us an update if they do that. Is that the right approach?
Council, if I may add, for future council agenda items, if you wanted to bring this up, Councilmember Wendell, as an item for staff to bring back as an ordinance revision, that's something I believe we would certainly welcome.
I think we've had some internal discussion that this would need to be updated anyways. What that process looks like is probably something we really need direction from the council. Do you want to be involved in that process, or do you want staff to handle it administratively? I wasn't here when the ordinance was originally enacted, but it was my understanding is there was one case where a home got moved from the north end of the community to what is now probably the central part of our community, and it was a very large 2-story, and it didn't necessarily fit within the neighborhood, and the neighbors weren't notified. So this was put into place to provide that opportunity for public input. I would say that in most cases, at least in my tenure with the city, when we've had these instances come up, there's been really no public testimony associated with any of these. So it's whatever direction we could certainly make those ordinance amendment to whatever your desires would be.
Councilmember Collins, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to moving this, don't they have to buy like a building permit?
They would have to get a building permit. They also need to, provide the route that they're choosing to take to do the moving. And so, in discussions with the applicant, he was meeting with the house moving companies. They would need to get a general contractor. That's all part of the application process. And so they will have to fulfill all of that. But a building permit, yes, will need to be obtained.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because couldn't we do some of that administrative stuff at that point? Or
Yes, we can certainly handle it all administratively if that's how you would like to proceed.
and that would come to your office then, correct?
It'd be through our office. We community development through the building services division. They handle the building permit process. We would make sure we have the route so that we can notify BMU, we can notify forestry department, we can notify the police department to make sure all of those provisions are in place in case they need to move traffic lights or trim some trees and whatnot. And usually there's costs that are associated with doing that. So we could handle all of that administratively.
Thanks, Mike.
I'll just say that I'll just bring this up during items for future, and that'll just formalize how we handle it.
All right. Please call the roll.
Duran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Collins.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 11A, action on Resolution 22-072, a resolution waiving the building permit fees for 15th Street South and 7th Avenue South Workforce Housing Project. Mike Struck, our Community Development Director, will review this item.
We received a request from the CD Properties LLC, who is the developer of the workforce housing project on 15th Street South and 7th Avenue South. And that's through with the RFP process, transferring of the land, and how all the financials have shaken out with the Housing Opportunity Funds and the city's contribution. They have requested consideration of waiving the building permit fees that are associated with those units. I believe they're looking at, there's 20 units total, approximately contained within 7 structures, roughly estimating it would save about $25,000 in fees that are then passed on to the end buyer in keeping those costs down. With our building permit fee structure, we don't have the ability administratively to waive those. There's specific things that we can, and so we're asking for your consideration to waive the building permit fees associated. Staff does recommend approval, and that stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there any council comments or questions? Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Problem with this, I mean, this project, we've already given quite a bit of money to. I know it's not a lot, it's $25,000, but, you know, we've given, like $10,000 per house, is that correct? And then we've given other money as well, right? Around maybe 150,000 or 180,000 or something to that effect.
Yeah, through previous action, the council did agree to provide a financial contribution of $10,000 per unit. Plus, they were provided the land for free, and that helped leverage funding from the South Dakota Housing Opportunity Fund, where they're funding it at $20,000 a unit. And so that's essentially all a grant, and so that helps buy down the cost of the individual units. This would just further buy it down approximately, a little over $1,000 per unit. That would save the home buyer at the end of the day.
Councilmember Specker.
Yeah, I originally had the same concern as Joey, but if we are waiving fees for ICAP and Habitat for Humanity, it seems to me that that's along the same lines. So I don't have a problem with this.
Pardon me for interrupting. Yeah, ICAP and Habitat for Humanity have both, they automatically get it through a resolution. It's just it just annually renews. We also did it on a case-by-case situation with some income-based housing. Typically, when you see them going to the South Dakota Housing Development Authority for funding, and when there's income restrictions and guidelines that are applied, that's typically when we'll see requests, and staff would consider it as, because there are some income restrictions associated with this. I think it's 115% of area median income, and then there are deed restrictions for a 10-year period of time upon the first sale to try and help keep those housing units in an affordability price range.
Councilmember Wendell.
Task force that convened more than 2 years ago now and came up with a comprehensive list was that we consider our fee structure and we potentially waive building permits for affordable and workforce housing projects like this. So this is kind of the echo of that initial tier of recommendations that came from that task force as a way to defray cost to the end buyer for these projects. This does align with the recommendations we got from that task force, and it was actually a tier 1 item, so one of the kind of the starting places to bring down the cost.
Any other comments? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tiltonburn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
No.
Duran. Aye.
Motion passes. All right, councilmember introduction of topics for future discussion. Councilmember Wendell, do you have anything on your mind?
I have the resolution number right now, actually. Okay, so let's, I'm just going to make a motion that we ask staff to take another look at section 22-223 of the municipal code ordinance on the public hearing. I think our intent is to waive the public hearing mandate and instead handle those safeguards internally.
Is there any other council discussion or questions on that particular item? Councilmember Specker.
No, not
Mr. Mayor, I have to that is you said the special situation was that the neighbors weren't notified, so can we just ensure that that is like part of the process, because that was why the resolution was put into place in the first time. Did I understand that correctly? Sorry to make you come up here again.
That is my understanding of why it was put into place, is to have that public hearing process to notify the neighbors. When it's an administrative function, you lose a little bit of that public hearing process. We can send letters out and state that you have to give a response within a certain number of days, but not everyone receives their mail as part of the other division within my department. A lot of people won't open mail if it comes from the city. They feel it's maybe a code enforcement issue instead of a public notice issue. So we publish in the paper. We do send notices out typically within 150 feet of the property. We can continue to do that and give a specified response date of when we'd want to hear back. And we'd still keep it administratively, but it's going to be approximately the same time frame as what it would involve coming to the council.
Mike, one thing I would add to that, though, is if the home were to be moved into a neighborhood where it didn't meet a setback or didn't meet a buffer of some sort, then that would trigger it going through a variance or a conditional use or some other process that would be public. So essentially, and Mike, correct me when I'm wrong here, if you're moving this house, it would be a house that meets all requirements of that lot. It would look very similar to the other homes in the neighborhood, and it would conform essentially to that. But if there was something about it that they couldn't fit in, I believe it would probably trigger some sort of other public process where the neighbors would then be notified and have opportunity to input. I would compare this to a new house being built next to another house. If it meets all the setbacks, requirements, and things of that nature, I assume in that situation the neighbors are not notified that a new house is necessarily being built next door. But Mike, I'd look to you that if there was anything off where it needed a variance or anything, that would still trigger a public process for a house being moved, correct?
That would be correct, any sort of a variance request, and then we have the notification process in place. I think the other challenging part is it's difficult to find places to move homes within the existing city limits because most developments have covenants and restrictions. And this was one where they found that there was a lot that did not have that. And so just for the public's knowledge, is the city does not enforce covenants and restrictions in developments. We don't have copies of that. We don't enforce it, but we'd really rely upon the applicant to really research that, and we'd strongly encourage them to. And in this particular case, the applicant did his due diligence to find a location that is suitable.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any other comments? Call the roll for this item to be on a future agenda.
Specker?
Aye.
Tiltonburn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
Collins?
Aye.
Duran?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye. Motion passes. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Specker.
I think public comments are good, and I think broadcasting these and publishing them on YouTube are good. But I also think that over the last year or two, and especially since I've been on council, I've noticed quite a few misinformation and hate speech that's presented during the public comments. And I would like to ask that the city look into ways of not broadcasting public comments or having them available on YouTube, but some other way that we can have them. I know there are cities that have come up with similar options for the same reasons, and I think we should look into those.
Is that a form of a motion?
Form of a motion.
Councilmember.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to vote no on this, Bonnie. And the reason is it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression. They come here and they talk. They want to be heard, even though we can't limit what they're talking about, I don't believe. That's just my thought on it.
I think we should have public comments, but I don't think they should be recorded on YouTube, and I think they should be still available to anyone that wants to hear them. but not give platforms for hate speech. And I don't want to be in the position of deciding what's hate speech, what's misinformation. I think if we just do it across the board to all public comments, have them available, but they have to be specifically requested.
You know, hate speech disgusts me just as much as it does everybody else. But it's, you know, it's our First Amendment, it's freedom of speech. And I'm still going to vote no on this one.
Call the roll on that. It'll be on the
I
next
have- I have a
agenda
question.
if it passes.
I have a question on like the clarification. Look at options, or is this a resolution that's coming forward, or what's
To look at
the outcome?
options to put so that we can put a resolution forward.
Okay, so this would be discussed at a future council meeting or study session? Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
A question of clarity, just to the open forum segment that's at the front end of our meetings, or is this all public comment, even if it comes throughout the agenda pertaining to particular items?
No, at the beginning.
Thank you.
Call the roll.
Tilden Burn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Collins,
No.
Doran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Okay. Any other items that anybody wants to bring up? Okay, advanced agenda. Next meeting, we have a study session starting at 5:15 for the budget. Budget session number 2. Consent agenda, we've got a couple volunteer board appointments. Presentation from SDSU Student Association, event summary for Kelsey Doom will give us an event summary on the downtown at sundown. We have no first readings at the moment. We have a change order, well, contract bid award for snow removal equipment. Obviously, the 2 items that we have second readings on this coming meeting. And then possibly not yet. Stay tuned on that one. And then, of course, we have the always anticipated city progress report by our assistant city manager. So, with that all being said, Jake's got one thing he wants to say, and before I go into this.
It's actually turned into go back to our October 11th budget workshop. So I've heard on the outside agencies, we want some of the outside agencies to present, specifically focusing on their applications and how they've utilized city funding to meet them. I would be curious if we have specific outside agencies we want to present and maybe some that we don't, just so we can give them a heads up on which ones we'll want to bring forward. And then the other one was, it sounded like an analysis of our outside agency funding to peer communities was requested, and that's something we put together for council in the past, so that would be easy to bring back together. But I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what we were hoping to bring back as staff to make that October 11th workshop as fruitful as possible.
Council have anything to add? Okay, thanks, Jake. All right, executive session. We're going to enter an executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2.3 for consulting with legal counsel and reviewing communications from legal counsel about proposed and pending litigation or contractual matters. And SDCL 1-25-2.5 discussing marketing and pricing strategies by a board or commission of a business owned by the state or any of its political subdivisions when public discussion may be harmful to the competitive position of the business. Enter a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session. There will be no action after this